So, welcome to today's Marketing Talks. My name is Gary Dehart. I'm the publisher and the host, publisher of Insightful Accountant, and the host of today's short 30-minute webinar, which is titled How to Automate Onboarding New Clients, presented by Janel Sykora, who is the founder of Kajabra Marketing for Accountants, which is an accounting firm or a marketing firm specializing in marketing for accountants. But before I turn this over to her, I do have a couple of, I've got one thing to share and a couple of housekeeping items. So I do want to real quickly just share some information about let me share my screen here. Sorry, Janelle.
No, you're good.
And just about our premium content offering and our programs called Be Insightful. And with this Be Insightful program, we basically have 9 training tracks. And those are the tracks there in front of you. It's Coach's Corner, app comparisons, where Murph is taking a look at apps across the year and giving you kind of a list of comparison of 10 apps to take a look at. Tech Stack Assembly with Kelly Parks. We have Your Tax Practice with Christine Gervais. Your Firm Accelerated from the folks at QB Express, where basically we're helping you build out a sales process. And then Practical Automations by Kyle Turriff, Niche Marketing for Growth by Janelle, who is on this webinar as well. Human Resources, which we had yesterday, and that's with Michelle LeBlanc. Michelle's an outsourced HR professional. And then Murph also is doing a series on desktop migrations. And so if you would like to receive a little bit more information on this program, just say yes to the poll question. If I can find where where the thing went, here we go. Too many
screens up.
Too many screens. So here we go. Let me just pop this poll in here real quick. So if you'd like information on the Be Insightful program, just say yes, disregard the question. But so I'm just saying, if you'd like information on the program, just say yes. And I didn't launch it. Here we go. Just say yes, and we will get this over to you in the next day or so. And then while you do that, this is just a 30-minute webinar, so there is no CPE. We do ask if you have questions, just put them in the Q&A panel. And then I think that is it. This will be posted to our archive on our YouTube channel. I'll put that link on in the chat for you as well. And then Janelle, if you can drop a copy of the slide deck either into the chat to everyone or to me, I can share that as well.
So, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
No, I'll do that towards the end here.
I'll go ahead and end the poll now. Thank you, Janelle. Janelle, I'll be here in the background if you need me.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's see here. All right. All right. You should all be able to see my screen now. I appreciate everyone hopping on. And today we are talking about onboarding. This is a topic that comes up very frequently with firms that we work with. And so we're going to talk about creating an onboarding process and then how to automate it so that every new client that you onboard comes into your firm in a consistent manner, smoothly, without friction, and so that no super important details fall through the cracks. So with that, I'm going to tell you that if you have any questions, I'll take a pause every few minutes. And if you've got questions, pop them into the Q&A, and I will be more than happy to answer them as we go along. All right. All right. So we are going to start at the point in your sales process where you've won the business. Let me get to the right screen. There. Okay. So you won the business. Now what? Now we have to deliver. So as some of you guys know who've heard me before, I am a career salesperson prior to starting my own company. And when you own your own firm, as you all well know, you tend to also be a salesperson. But I've always believed that this is the hard part. It isn't selling that's the hard part. It's this. This is the part that used to make me incredibly nervous before I had my own company. What I mean by that is that there needs to be a lot of attention given to creating a process so that your clients feel welcomed, they feel like they're excited they chose to do business with you, and so that others in your business also know everything they need to know about the client to make that client experience really good. So I have a few scenarios of things that I've run across in firms before, and I just want to know if any of you guys have experienced any of these. One of them, the lost client. So imagine, and this is probably more pre-COVID, right? When clients came into the office a lot more. But have you ever had a new client show up for their first meeting and no one had any idea why they were there? That has actually happened. That would be mortifying, wouldn't it? Or how about the tech nightmare? Client, you send them a link to the portal, they can't figure it out, or they have trouble accessing it for whatever reason. So they call in, they talk to someone who answers the phone and they're struggling with it, or even worse, they get transferred to their accountant who's their main point of contact, who isn't very tech savvy, and there's a lot of back and forth and frustration over getting into the portal. That happens. Let's look at a few others. All right, how about the communication breakdown? I know this is common, right? So this is where you just forget when you don't have an onboarding process or a really tight one to communicate important deadlines. This happens. Imagine, everyone's had that client that shows up on April 10th if you're a tax firm and thinks that they can bring you more documents on the 10th so that you can easily turn around their tax return by the 15th. Why couldn't you? That's an example of a communication breakdown. And then, of course, this one, I just saw this recently, the other communication breakdown, which is more internal, where you've got, say, a partner, a managing partner, owner of a firm that meets with a client during the initial consultation, notes a whole lot of very particular things about the client, important things about their specific situation. And guess what happens to it? Nothing. It stays in that person's folder on their desk. And 2 weeks later, it is buried in a pile that is sliding off his or her desk. And then you've got staff that are completely oblivious, trying to field calls and questions from an increasingly frustrated client. So I have a question for you. Now, Gary mentioned that this is not CPE, so this really isn't a polling question. So I'm not going to launch a poll on this, but I would love it if you throw it into chat, if you would throw in what your biggest challenge is. Is it gathering client information? Is it communicating effectively? Is it setting expectations? What's your biggest challenge when it comes to onboarding? And actually, chat may be closed. You may have to put it into, yeah, sorry, chat is disabled. Sorry, didn't mean to set you guys up there. Just throw it into Q&A. Just type in A, B, or C. I would just be very curious to know. Okay. C, setting expectations. Oh, okay. I love this one. A, B, and C. Exactly. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. It seems like, oops, let's see here. Let me get that off my screen. All right. Okay. Q&A. There we go. All right. Oh, A. Okay. So all sorts of different problems, but that people are having, but it seems like a lot of people, it's between A, gathering client information, and setting expectations. So let's dig into these for just a quick minute. Talk about gathering client information. You can't tell me you don't love chasing clients, right? And emailing them and trying to get those last 2 documents you need to finally complete their tax return or do their reconciliation or their accounting work. I get it. That is a huge time suck for so many accounts that I work with, is chasing clients. So we'll talk about that. But then communicating effectively, that is more than just communicating to the client. So that's communicating internally, right? As well as externally. Are there multiple people involved in onboarding? Do they know what roles they play? For example, is someone setting up the new client portal and maybe somebody else is setting them up in your practice management software? Or do you have multiple people inundating your client with lots of different emails about what's needed as you get started working together? But either way, A and B really play into C, right? Is everything can be solved by setting expectations correctly. So here's what I mean by that. Things like internal deadlines. Do you have an internal deadline that if you don't have, I'll use a tax firm example again, if you don't have everyone's information in, or if you don't have someone's information in by, say, March 1st for the April 15th deadline, that you automatically extend that. Also setting expectations like, what what to expect from you, but also when to expect it and what you expect from them, right? So if you aren't selling a transaction, and I would be willing to bet that none of you on this call want to sell transactions or commodities, you're selling an ongoing relationship where there has to be some skin in the game on their end as well. So it's helping them understand that there are certain expectations that they have to meet as well in order to get the most value out of the relationship. You can't do everything. So the other thing that's important to set expectations for is, how do you communicate? Are you communicating primarily through email? More and more, I'm seeing firms that communicate back and forth via text, because it helps enormously when it comes to gathering client information. You can reach clients a lot quicker when you're texting them than email. People always respond to texts. Rarely are they going to see an email right when you send it, but they will always open that text and see it. Whether or not they respond to it then is potentially another question. But also, what is the scope of work? Has that been well communicated? How do you handle those quick questions that you know inevitably are going to come up and not be quick, even though the client thinks they are? So there are a lot of things that you can communicate in the setting expectations phase that will save you a ton of headaches later on. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Now, I'm sure you guys have all heard the old cliche term of first impressions are everything. Well, I know that we often talk of the importance of first impressions when it's meeting someone new or in a job interview or a new prospect. But what about the second impression? When you have the business, how do you execute? I would argue that second impressions are as important, if not more important, than first impressions. And a negative onboarding experience can cause your client to start getting buyer's remorse. They can start questioning you, and that might even hurt your retention. So, very interestingly, according to Thomson Reuters, 89% of customers experience friction during the onboarding process. Now, that can lead to people even leaving, right? And our job as professionals is to really think about that process and make it as frictionless as possible. Now, I'm sure that everyone here on the phone has experienced some sort of friction in an onboarding process in their own personal lives. And I'll give you an example of one that cost business. So we had a firm for a company knocking on our door, literally door to door, a few months back, asking us to change our internet service provider. Well, luckily for the door knocker, he got my husband. I'm not as nice to people who ignore the no soliciting sign. But he got my husband, who is a nice guy and happily listened to his spiel and happily told him that he would get him in front of me, and who he lovingly referred to as quote unquote upper management. He decided to reveal this to me at dinner that night, and I said, there's no way, we are not changing. I don't want to waste my time. It's not broken. My job relies on the internet. I can't risk it. No. Then he sheepishly said, yeah, but I promised him you would. And I said, fine, he has 5 minutes and that's it. So he came back. He did a really phenomenal job doing something very unique. And he said, listen, and he sounded very humble and very genuine. And even I, who can see through anything as a salesperson, fell for this. And he said, listen, how about we do this? Let me bring the equipment to your home. I'm going to leave it on your doorstep with instructions. You install it. It'll be so easy. You can install it in 5 minutes. If you don't absolutely love the speed when you install it tomorrow night when I bring it over, you can uninstall it. Here's my personal cell phone. You can text me and I'll come pick it up. And I'm like, all right, why not? So sure enough, he made a fatal error. And when he dropped the equipment off and I did go and plug it in, it didn't work. And so I turned to my husband and said, I told you, that's exactly why I didn't want to do this. Take it out, text this guy and tell him to come back and pick up his equipment. I'm done. I'm never going to use them. So what happened was he didn't do a lot of due diligence, and he found there wasn't the proper wire piped into our house for that internet service. So he should have done the proper onboarding of a prospect and made sure that we had the wiring correct so that I really could plug the equipment in. That's an example of losing that business. Ironically enough, I live where we had 2 hurricanes in 2 weeks and I was without internet. for almost a week. And so by the act of God, I guess, they did end up getting my business because I had to switch providers. My other one was out for almost 2 weeks. So that is an example of how onboarding can derail a relationship if you let it. But we're not going to let that happen. And that's why we're talking today about creating an onboarding process. So once you create an onboarding process, why do we want to talk about automating it? I'm going to show you some examples here in a second, but I think you get the picture of what chaos can happen and what that looks like if every client is onboarded differently. If efficiency and consistency relieves the pressure of that, then we need to focus on the process. Anytime you automate a process, you drive efficiency and consistency. And having a smooth onboarding process reinforces to that client that they made a good decision in choosing to do business with you. Now, I get it. If you don't have a process now, or if you have a not so great process now, I get it. Change isn't fun. No one loves it. But before we can talk about automation, we have to look at mapping out the process. And I promise you that once you actually create the process and then you put it into play, it will save you so many headaches and lost clients down the road. All right. Okay, I'm going to show you an example here. Oops. Sorry. Okay. If you don't have a process right now, don't panic. If your process stinks, don't panic. That's why we're here. Here's where I recommend you start. The first thing that you need to do is start by mapping out and documenting what your current process looks like today. And really think through what's missing. What are the things that frustrate you or your staff or your clients most when you begin working together? What things happen the most that you wish didn't? Where are the gaps? And what are the important details that can be missed? Now, if you're a visual person and you like flowcharts like I do, I highly recommend like a great tool for mapping out your process. If you haven't done this before, is Canva. I'm using Canva right now to present this to you. I use Canva for everything, but for mapping out processes, I'm telling you, it's very easy. And being able to see the flow of it is extremely helpful, as well being able to communicate that flow to anybody else internally who needs to see it. So here is a very simple example here on the right in this workflow, just one example. I'm going to take it a few steps back. I told you we're starting this process where they actually have already signed the paperwork and they're getting ready to start with you. This process shows a little bit more than that. It actually starts with that initial consultation, whether you call it a discovery meeting or whatever you call it. It starts there. That first meeting you have, that's the first point in your sales prospect or first point in your sales process. So you have the consultation, you give them a proposal, you follow up on that proposal, and then maybe there's an engagement letter, maybe that's baked into your proposal, either way. Once things are signed, now you're setting up the client account. And there are things that you need to set up that client account. And maybe the next thing that happens when you set up that client account is to set up a kickoff meeting to begin the relationship. And then maybe the last part that happens of the actual onboarding process is to pre-schedule check-ins. I work with a firm where we've been implementing and are implementing for 2025 as well, setting up proactively quarterly meetings with those clients that they meet with quarterly. Reason for that is, again, chasing a client to try and pin them down to a time to meet each quarter is no fun. It takes up time. But if you can send out a booking link and ask a client to pre-book their quarterly meetings, whether you do that once a quarter or at the beginning of the year for the whole year, and allow them to reschedule, that saves you a lot of time and it gets it on their calendar. So just a suggestion, this is just one of many things that we'll talk about, but this is an example of mapping out your onboarding process. All right, let's move to the next one. So before we go any further though, I want to talk about some of the key pieces of an onboarding process to consider when you do map it out. So here's some examples or parts, components, whatever you want to call it, of an onboarding process that I think are very important. So first, making sure to have an automation or something in place, a process in place for following up on your proposals. When you send out a proposal or an engagement letter, whatever yours looks like, I see a lot of firms who just kind of hope that hope that people respond to it, and if they don't, oh well. That is definitely a way to lose business if you're not following up. And I always recommend having a process in place for a combination of texts and emails, because sometimes things go to spam when we don't intend them to. So having a combination of texts and emails to follow up on that proposal is important. And then you're going to have people that you think are a perfect fit, or that, they give you all of the signals that you're a perfect fit for them as well. And they just don't move forward. It happens. But for these people, you need to have a process in place for nurturing them and staying in front of them. We'll talk about that here more towards the end. But once someone signs your proposal or your engagement letter, it's ideal to have, say, 3 to 5 emails for onboarding. What might that look like? This is where you need to stop and think about what you have to get from the client and what you need to communicate to the client. So, for example, your first email might be something like, welcome to the firm. It might have a video about, hey, here's what we're all about. We are so excited to have you on board. Here's what to expect next. It could be just a very simple, inviting, non-overwhelming email. Then maybe email 2, the next day, would be gathering, this is where you're going to want to gather your client information, right? And this is where you've got to be really careful not to overwhelm and inundate. So consider a very simple, short email using links to any forms that you need people to fill out. And then also consider this an opportunity to set expectations, such as any internal deadlines that your firm has, or we respond to email within 24 hours, as an example, or for questions about X, email tax at, or for questions about X, email info at. If you have any specific internal process protocol that you need to communicate, this is a great place to do it. But you will see this could be a pretty overwhelming and lengthy email. So this is where I go back to saying, please incorporate links where you can to forms, etc., and make your email very readable by incorporating bullet points, subheadings, things like that. Also, I recommend using a PS if you want to emphasize something like date we need this by, as an example. Oftentimes people will skim through an email, but they'll always read the PS. It's a weird psychological thing, but they will read the PS. Another idea for this type of an email to avoid the overwhelm, but yet communicate everything that you need to communicate in terms of this is what we need from you and this is how we work, is create a firm playbook. Create a playbook of your firm that has everything in it we just talked about. So, such as, here are all the things that we need from you before tax time. Here are all the things that we need from you now for your permanent file. And here's what happens during tax season. Here's our process. So you don't have to email us constantly asking about where your tax return is. And, or, here's our monthly accounting process, and any nice references or like resources that you've got for them. If you put all of that into a really nice playbook, that's a high value resource that you can literally link in that second email that will have everything in it. You will have set expectations. You will have told them everything you need. You'll have links to forms for them to fill out, or links to how to use the portal, etc. So I highly recommend doing something like that. But just make sure that that email is engaging and not overwhelming. And then I would also recommend potentially another email where it's meet the team. If you've got a team of people and more than one person that's touching this client, introduce them. Again, this is all about relationships. Make sure they know who the faces are behind the names and make them human. Make sure that you tell them something fun about this person, a hobby or whatever they're okay with, but with you telling, but definitely introduce the team and the people that are going to be touching that account. Very important. And then this is one that people often miss. I recommend at least, let's just say 90 days after you start working together, maybe longer, but probably not much longer. send out another email or add this to your automation where you're asking for a Google review or a survey. Or you're asking them to fill out a feedback form that if the feedback is really good, takes them straight to leave you a Google review. That's really important. Okay. So those are key components. Now we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm just going to show you an example of a real world, like an automation sample in action. So we can put all these pieces together, and yes, you can do it manually. You absolutely can. If you're super good at staying on top of all your processes and managing that, you can. Is it optimal? Not really. It's time consuming to do that. And there's also that risk for error, right? But to save your staff time, it's really a good idea to try and automate as much of it as you can. And by that, I mean, setting up an email sequence as an example, the one that we just talked about, so that it can be triggered by someone getting into the system and just adding a tag to that client contact record that would then trigger that entire timed sequence to go out. Inside the system, it might look something like the image on the right, which might make your eyes cross as much as QuickBooks makes mine cross. So don't worry about that so much. I just wanted to show you what that can look like inside an automation system. But here's another example of a process. This process is a little different than the one I just outlined, but it's also a good one, where a firm may send out a welcome email. It starts with a welcome email that includes instructions with portal, to access the portal. And then it goes into introducing the team before sending out that checklist of information that the client needs to provide. And then finally, there is a fourth email here in this particular example of an onboarding automation where they're scheduling an initial meeting to kick things off. Again, I do recommend that email that goes out, say 90 days or so after you begin working together to get some feedback, and especially to leave a Google review. Again, Google reviews are very, very important. People read them. They will read them. They will read how you respond to them. And the percentage is super high. It's not 100%, but it's in the 90s of how many people read the Google reviews before they engage with a professional services firm. Okay. Okay, so let's talk just a minute about a CRM, because you're probably thinking, okay, well, where the heck do I automate this? Now, you may also think, well, I thought onboarding is something we do in our practice management system. Is it possible to automate your onboarding process inside your practice management software? Maybe. There are lots of different practice management softwares out there. Some are more, have better functions than others. But most practice management software is designed for managing clients, tracking time, having client notes in them. Some do document storage, and then of course, billing and invoicing. A CRM is actually different from practice management system. A CRM is really kind of I like to call it a sales and marketing automation engine. And it really works to manage all of your opportunities, your prospects, your leads. And then once those leads become clients, they should also still live inside that CRM, whether or not they live inside your practice management system, because those clients could potentially be opportunity to upsell as they grow, maybe grow into a bigger package that you offer. But and maybe also having them in a CRM is another advantage of that, is that you can stay in front of them with communication very easily if you're sending out reminders or newsletters or something like that. And then also, remember I said a few slides back about those clients that choose not to go forward with you because it's just not the right timing, perhaps. You want to nurture them. What I mean by that is staying in front of them and setting up a campaign where you're in their inbox offering value, say twice a month, is usually what I recommend. But a CRM is also a place where you can automate things like proposal follow-ups and, of course, your onboarding sequence. So I want to just give you a quick example. So let's just say that you signed your new ideal client and you signed them this morning, and you send it over to an admin to say, hey, or maybe you yourself are doing it, where you want to send out a sequence that you've designed that we've just talked about, that looks something like we just talked about. What you would do inside a CRM is you would log in, you would find that client's contact record, and you would literally add a tag to their name that triggers the onboarding automation. So boom, done. They're onboarded. That's literally all you have to do. You're done. Now you can go set your client up in your practice management software for invoicing and everything else that you do with them in practice management. All right. Let's see here. All right. So I want to focus on a few takeaways for you guys. One of the things that's really important to me is I give a lot of information, but I want to boil it down to what are a couple of things that you can literally leave this marketing talk and go do, right? Without needing anything more. And here are some things that you can do to get a good start. And by the way, this is great timing because tax season is going to be here before we know it. And if you can set up a really good onboarding process now, it's going to save you a lot of headaches. And I'm not saying just for tax season because you all on here may not all be tax firms. Even as you go to start 2025, now is the time to be putting your processes in place so that as you bring on new clients starting, say, January 1st, you've got a good process in place. So where do you start with that? Take a deep breath, make a list, sit down, get out your legal pad, open up a Word doc, Google Doc, whatever you need to do, but make a list of everything you need to get from a new client. And then make a list of everything that you need to communicate with them. All of your deadlines, all of your expectations, all of how my firm works, all of those email addresses you need them to email if they have a question about X. Make a list of all of it and then map it out. Well, before you map it out, determine, also, this is another thing, we haven't really talked much about this, determine whether you need multiple onboarding processes, because if you do, you may have a certain onboarding process for a very simple basic client, and then you might have a far more complex onboarding process for a client that is, you're going to be their outsourced CFO. There may be a lot more to that process. So if you've got multiple processes, make your list for both of them. And then map it out, whether you're using a tool like Canva or you're putting it on a whiteboard, doesn't matter, but map it out. And then find a system that will allow you to automate the process that you've built. And if your practice management system can handle that, great. If not, what you need is a CRM. And let's see, I'm going to take a pause and see if there's questions because I have not done that. I told you I would. Hang on. Let's see. CRM for a sole proprietor. Yes, 100%. That's an excellent question. What about a CRM for a sole proprietor? I firmly believe that every business needs a CRM. I don't care if you're a one-man band or you've got thousands of people. You don't need Salesforce by any stretch of the imagination, but every business needs a CRM because you have to, that's your sales and marketing engine. And every business needs to grow their revenue, right? So that's an excellent question. Let's see here. And by the way, your CRMs, where you're going to find so many hidden opportunities and gaps that you may have when you're thinking, I need to grow my business. I need to grow my firm. I need new leads. It's not always that you need new leads. There may be leads right there in front of you if you've got a good CRM. Okay, that was an excellent question. If you have any others, let me know. I will skip right past the Q&A slide, and we are really at time. So I'm going to leave you with this. If you need help setting up a CRM, if you need help, you're just not sure how to map out your onboarding process, hit me up. You can go to kajabra.com and there's a button up in the top right-hand corner and you can schedule a meeting with me. There's no obligation. I'm not going to try and talk you into anything. Don't worry about that. Those of you who've seen me before and who know me know that's not how I operate. But if you need help setting up a workflow that helps you move your leads down the funnel and to become clients and then help onboard them to give them the best possible second impression, we can definitely help you with that. We do work exclusively with accounting firms and especially firms who want to sell more of those high value monthly services. And we do have a CRM that is designed and full of content just for accountants. But I am more than happy to help any of you on here if you have any questions at all. And I really appreciate your time today. I hope you were able to gain value from this. And Gary, I will download a copy of this exact slide presentation and send it over to you right after this, if that's okay. And with that, I will turn it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yep. And that, so people, process, and technology, right? And they're all core. And it's funny you're saying that about the CRM. I've been doing that this week, kind of going back through ours because we started HubSpot 6 months ago. And, I get emails, just names getting populated into this database who we don't know who they are. We don't know where they come from. We connected Zoom to it, and now we're getting things put into Zoom. But I'm like, well, from what webinar did they come from, right? I mean, you have to stay on top of it because it can certainly get out of control.
Yep.
Super generous offer of you to connect with anyone who does have questions. I'm sure that's greatly appreciated. Did you provide your contact info for that? You want to do that one more time?
Sure. So all you have to do to reach out to me, you can get me in two places. One, you can find me on our website, kajabra.com. You can go out there and the button in the top right corner will allow you to schedule time with me directly. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, Janel Sykora, and you can connect with me there as well. I love connecting with people on LinkedIn.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody,
Thank
for
you.
spending about 35, 40 minutes with us. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks.
Thanks.